Lois is on.
Yes, good morning.
Hi, okay, let me do what I gotta do to get you on the speaker thing. Okay, say hi again. One mic.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm hearing.
Okay, now you're going down.
Okay. You guys hear me, don't you, out of that? Huh?
I can hear you.
We're not supposed to have that. Let me find out why I have that.
Should be getting the feed from the tap.
No, no, it's me. I don't know. Let me
Put it down.
mute this. Hang on. How about now? Is that better? Can you hear me okay, Chris?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, and I can hear you. Okay, good. I think I was live on both cameras, so let's see. So I got that. Okay, so where do we leave off? You know, we haven't done this for a while. You know, it was we came along with Palm Sunday and we had the guest speaker, Dominic Rivkin. And then the following week was Easter and we didn't have class. And then last week me and I think half the church were down with COVID. So we shut everything down pretty much for last week. So then we got to figure out where we left off. So we're going through the life of Christ. We did John chapter 2, which was the wedding at Cana, and Jesus doing the water into wine. We got into John chapter 3, which was Jesus meeting with Nicodemus and telling him that he needs to be born again. And then chapter 3 kind of ended with Jesus and John baptizing kind of together. You know, they may have been on opposite sides of the river, I don't know, but they were baptizing in the river at the same time, probably not the same location. And then the last time we gathered, I did kind of a special thing about why John hadn't written a birth narrative of Jesus. But we ended up with him being in front of Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate asking him if he was a king. And Jesus goes through, if my kingdom were here, you know, and all that stuff. But he said to Pilate, it is for this reason that I was born. And I made the case that I think that was John's birth narrative. You know? So anyway, so we left off and they're baptizing in the river. Now, the main theme of John 4, and most people know it as the encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well. Excuse me. But it starts out in the first 4 verses. This is in John 4, if you need to turn there. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, and then parenthetically it says, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. So I got the map out. Okay, everybody's got a map. Everybody but me. Larica's here. Everybody, welcome, Larica. Okay. Anyway, so we've got the map here. Okay. Now listen let's go back to the baptizing part. So Jesus and John are baptizing, and then it says that Jesus figures out the Pharisees are hearing that John and Jesus are baptizing, and Jesus is thinking that he didn't, that they didn't need the trouble. There's two things over there. That they didn't need the trouble, that the Pharisees were going to cause trouble. They were going to somehow pit John and Jesus against each other. Okay? So so he says, so Jesus is saying, I'm getting out of Judea. I'm just going to leave so we don't have the trouble. So if you look on your map in the southern portion there, the biggest word there says Judea. Okay, and that's where they were doing things, down by the river. Okay. So he says that he left Judea and departed again for Galilee, and Galilee is way up here in the green at the top of the map. So he's going to go from Judea. I should put it up there. I need to figure it out. Anyway, so he goes from the bottom of the map. He's got to go from the bottom of the map to the top of the map, okay? But he says he left Judea and departed again to Judea, but he needed to go through Samaria. Okay, and Samaria is here, the green in the center, okay? But he didn't need to go through Samaria. Nobody went through Samaria. So it's not like he had, the train ran through Samaria and stuff like that. Everybody went around Samaria because the Jews did not associate with the Samaritans. But Jesus says that he had to go through Samaria. That means he's got business to take care of while he's there. Hi, Howard. I didn't see you there earlier. Anyway, so it said that he needed to go through Judea. So what he's saying is, here he is in Judea. He's baptizing, doing his things. He realizes that there's going to be trouble with the with the Pharisees. It's not like Jesus feared the Pharisees, but it wasn't time for him to cause trouble. It wasn't time for him to get arrested. It wasn't time for him to get crucified. It wasn't time for him to, it wasn't time. Whatever we want to say, it just was not time. Then we've got the thing where it said in the baptizing, where it says, Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples. Who knows what that's all about? Why he didn't baptize people. Pardon? Well, it could be training, but they're baptizing in John's baptism still. Okay, so it wasn't like this was a special kind. It doesn't say. It's just a parenthetical, statement that John puts in there. But there's no explanation. There's no explanation for it. So, and then when he said he needed to go through Samaria, so. Like I say, he's got some kind of appointment in Samaria that he's got to, do. Who knows the history of Samaria? I think I've got it in your notes. I haven't looked. Do I got it in your notes? I got it in your notes there. In 722, we all remember this is BC, so maybe not as many of us remember, but 722 BC. Is the Assyrians came down and raided the northern kingdom. That was the 10 tribes of Israel. You got the top of Israel was Israel and the bottom was Judea. Okay. And so the Assyrians came down as a judgment from God. We were talking to Master's Men the other day in Revelation 9, when it's talking about the pit being open and the smoke coming out and the locust coming out. And we associate that with God's judgment, that God's using Satan and demons to judge his people. And this is what he did with Assyria. You know, there was nothing good about the Assyrians, nothing at all. Read Jonah. Nineveh was part of Assyria. You know, they were savages, but God still used them to judge his people. So anyway, they came down, they took out all the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom and took them back to wherever they took them back to. They're still lost tribes of Israel. Nobody knows where they've ended up. But what they left behind was kind of like the peasant class who would do them no good. And this was the beginning of the Samaritans, because as people moved into the area, now these people that were left behind intermarried with the foreign people that came, you know, that came in. And that was the beginning of the Samaritans. So then when Jews come back into the land, you gotta remember, in 586, Babylon came down and took the southern kingdom. Okay, but when the Jews got back into the land, they didn't like the Samaritans. You know, it's almost like the Samaritans, you know, we kind of think of Samaritans kind of being like half-breed Jews. But the Jews thought of them as even less than that. They didn't even think of them, they didn't want to claim any part of them as Jews. It was really just a racial, excuse me, a racial hate for these people. This is building up to something, but that they really hated them, didn't want to do anything, have anything to do with them. So in your notes, though, I got, you know, Samaria was important. What I've got there is this is where Abram first came when he arrived into Canaan from Babylonia, you know, from Ur of the Chaldees. He ended up in this, you know, the area for Samaria. This is where God first appeared to Abram in Canaan and renewed the promise of giving the land to him and his descendants in Genesis chapter 12. This is where Abram built an altar and called upon the name of the Lord, again in Genesis 12. This is where Jacob came safely when he returned with his wives and children from his time with Laban. Remember, Jacob went to his uncle, you know, his father's brother, something, you know, to find a wife. And then he wanted Rachel, and Laban, being the bad guy, Snidely Whiplash, you know, like that, switched out Leah. And so he ended up consummating the marriage with Leah. And then when he complained and wanted Rachel, they said, for me another 7 years. And like that. Anyway, when he left, that's where he went to, was Samaria, with what is now, you know, Samaria in Canaan. This is where Jacob bought a piece of land from a Canaanite named Hamor for 100 pieces of silver. And you could read about all of those. This is where Jacob built an altar to the Lord and called it Elohe Israel. And this establishes the connection between Jacob and what became known as Jacob's well there in Sychar, because the woman at the well is going to be at Jacob's well. Okay, so you got to get this all connected. Sychar, Shechem. I don't know if Shechem's on your map. Sychar is, okay, is on the up there by where it says Samaria. Was also the place where Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, was raped, and the sons of Jacob massacred the men of the city in retaliation. It's where the plot of ground that Jacob gave his son Joseph, land Jacob had conquered from the Amorites with his sword and bow in an unrecorded battle. You know, it doesn't say anything about the battle, it just makes reference to it. This is where the bones of Joseph were eventually buried when they were carried up from Egypt. This is where Joshua made a covenant with Israel, renewing their commitment to God, to the God of Israel, proclaiming, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." So you can see there's a big old history of Israel in that, you know, in that area. And, and the interesting part is I was talking to Ray before the service started. And because what do we think of the woman at the well? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Who is she? Pardon? She's a whore. Anyway, let's put it this way. She's somewhat loose. It's going to turn out she had 5 husbands, and now she's living with another guy. Well, we think about that, but I don't know that that's the right picture of, who she is. But that's what we get out of this story, and there's so much more. But I was telling Ray that, if you read the story, she can go one-on-one with Jesus about what their religion is, who's been in their land, who their founders are. I mean, just little things that you miss in there because we get so caught up into, well, Jesus is talking to this, loose woman, but he's trying to bring her into the kingdom, which that is part of the story too. But that's mainly what we think. But I'm sitting there looking at, they got this history of Samaria, and she knows the history. And when he's bringing things up, she might be wrong. She may be trying to get herself out of trouble, but she knows the right words to say, to deal with him. And that's a big deal, especially in a time when men didn't talk to women, men didn't talk to Samaritan women, rabbis definitely didn't. And here's Jesus doing it, Ray.
Well, the thing that struck me kind of strange was the fact that Jesus decided to go through Samaria when everybody else is going bypassing it for obvious reasons and everything. And the other thing was the fact that he was going to be there at noon or so, and nobody was at the well, so he was going to be at the well by himself.
Yeah.
But he knew that this woman was going to be there, and that the thing that I didn't understand was, why did he pick her to make himself known as being the Messiah?
Yeah. And the text obviously isn't going to tell us, but it's like, I think there's so much when it says, but he had to go through Samaria. I mean, he's got an appointment. And it turns out he's got an appointment with her. And what we're going to see, because she turns out to be the Billy Graham of town. She really does. And maybe some other person wouldn't have. How many people hear the gospel and hide it in their heart and hide it from everybody? I think in the mission verse, didn't talk about being a light shining and the don't put your your candle under a bushel and stuff like that. How many do that? And here we'll see with her, she doesn't, and there's little things that Jesus does that gets her to move, to move in the right direction. So we got a little bit of the history of Samaria. And let's see. Oh, to show you the hate. Okay, remember, these are God's people, Israel. The Samaritans built their own temple on a different mountain. Okay, and it was probably because they were, well, one, they were kind of left out, but two, they were there by themselves for all those, whatever that period is, and there is no temple. The temple, wasn't in good condition. All the priests and that. Well, I take it back. Even the Solomon's sons in the northern kingdom weren't very faithful. And they built temples out in the high places among the Asherods and, things like that. So anyway, so they've got their own temple going, and they've got their own kind of, religion going, and they're comfortable in it. But I was reading somewhere where Israel burned down their temple on Mount Gerizim or whatever it was in 125 BC. So this goes way back. You know, that they don't like each other. And that plays into the woman's trying to figure out, who's this guy coming here talking to me? You know, one, he's talking to me as a woman, he's talking to me as a Samaritan, he's coming here, he's asking me for help, you know, so. So it says in verse 5, so he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, which we got Sychar over here, somewhere, you know, somewhere in there. Near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph, which we talked about. Now Jacob's well was there. We talked about that. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. And the 6th hour, as we all know, is noon. That's right. Okay. And the only reason we know that is because we read it in here at times, you know. But to me, the 6th hour is 6 o'clock in the morning. So Jacob's well was there. The city of Sychar was ancient Shechem, which we read about in some of those Abraham things. It was the capital city for the, for the Samaritans. Let's see. So he puts himself in the right place, you know, he's in the right city, he's in Shechem there, Sychar, whatever you want to call it. He's on the city, it makes up the land that Jacob had bought, and Jacob's well is there. It's almost like, wow, what a coincidence, you know. And it's the 6th hour, and like Ray said, that's noontime. It's hot, you know, and he's thirsty. Yeah. And they didn't have any bottled water. And we laugh. I mean, look how spoiled we are.
Goat skin.
What's that?
Goat skin.
Yeah, but you got to make your own goat skin. So anyway, that's the connection. The connection is between Jacob and what became known as Jacob's well. Now here's another thing about Samaritans. Okay. What Samaritan stories do we have in the Bible?
The Good Samaritan.
We got the Good Samaritan, yeah.
Boat.
Pardon?
The others were going past this.
Right, no, yeah, we got the Good Samaritan, we got this lady, you know, here with the well. We got James and John, we all know the story. Should we call fire down on them? You're talking about a Samaritan village, you know, like that. And then Jesus had told the 12 when they were to go out 2 by 2 and go through, and he said to not to go into any villages of the Samaritans. You know, which is kind of funny because here's Jesus in the village of the Samaritan, but he's telling the disciples not to go. You know, I can't. So we've got modern day Bible story anyway, talking about the Samaritans, specifically about the Samaritan. So we'll get into the woman at the well here, but Andy had started out about the Good Samaritan. Somebody quickly tell the story of the Good Samaritan. In two verses.
Side of the road, and the rabbi walked by him, but the Good Samaritan picked him up, put him in the hotel, gave the innkeeper a lot of money, said, take care of him until I get back.
Okay, who are we in the story?
The Good Samaritan.
Now, that's who we want to be. That's right, you know. Some people say, well, we're the man beaten up on the road and Jesus comes and saves. It's not. We're the rabbis. We're the rabbis. We could care less about other people in general. You know, sinful man.
Wasn't that what I was saying?
Pardon?
Wasn't that what I was saying in the sermon?
Yeah, no, right, exactly. No, it's a common thing. But we, being who we are, we go, the Good Samaritan must be the Christian. And it's not. We got left to ourselves. We just walk away. We walk around. Yeah.
we record everything on cell phone.
That's right, that's right. Yeah, you think about it, and I'm just free floating here, but you think about it. If Christians were the Good Samaritan, would there be homeless? Yeah, see, that's the thing, see, is that there wouldn't be homeless. Now, to try to tackle homelessness now, just to get the guilt off of all of you, because I would have taken care of it, no. But is that the homelessness is really, really bad right now. But if we had been the Good Samaritans 40 years ago, yeah, we wouldn't be in that situation. But for those 40 years, we were the rabbis. That's somebody else's problem. Somebody else will come along and, take care of it and all that. So, so it said in there, being wearied from his journey. And we talked about that. He was traveling from Judea to Samaria. I don't know how far. I guess you could look at if there's a legend on that map. Pardon? 40 miles. How long does it take us to walk 40 miles? Huh? Probably. Got to remember, we don't get to say, well, I'm going to walk out 95 and out 40, and you walk on the asphalt. Look at the terrain next to the highways. And that's what you'd be walking across. So even though in a straight line on flat surface, maybe you could put in, I don't know, 3 miles an hour, 10 hours.
2 miles an hour.
Okay, so 2 miles an hour, say you go for 10 hours in a day, maybe take you 15 hours, but 10 of those hours you're walking. So you got 20 miles at max. So you're talking 2 days. How you feeling at the end of 40 miles? Yeah. Yeah. And you gotta remember, Jesus was probably a strong guy. I say that just because I'm sure everybody was strong guys back then, just because you had to do everything, you can make your own goat skin, bag. But yeah, but still, you're tired, you're hot, you're tired. We're gonna find out later that the disciples were with him part of the way and then they went into town. Good chance they took the goat skins with them, and left Jesus with nothing. Because she's going to talk to him and say, when he's trying to give her the living water, she's going to say, what are you going to draw it with? You don't have anything. So there he is. But like I say, I think Jesus, he's got everything that he sets, up. And you got to remember, Jesus was fully God and he was fully man. So whatever troubles we would have making that journey is what Jesus had. Yeah, I mean, he didn't get the fly part of the way. Okay.
Yep.
Huh? No, I see. I said that earlier. I'm sure he was strong. If he's 30 years old, I mean, in my mind anyway, I think I used to do stuff like that when I was 30 years old. Maybe I didn't, but you did stuff like that. And then we said it was the 6 hours, so we know that it was hot and tired. So now we get into verse 7 through 9. Jesus is going to speak to this Samaritan woman. And it says, a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no, that was her question. Then the statement after that is John, for Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So Jesus there at noon. Ray kind of touched on this. Why was he there at noon? It's a good chance that this woman, being of lesser moral standards, was an outcast. The women, because we see this in other places, the women would go in the morning together to, write this down, women, to gather the water. No, but to, to gather the water, it'd be their meeting place, they'd probably talk about things that Samaritan women talk about, and, that was just like, and then they would go and proceed with their day. And maybe this lady was an outcast and she couldn't go down there. Either she was an outcast or she was embarrassed. I mean, didn't want to go and put up with the judgment that you would feel that you would, get. But she's there at noon.
She's probably really interested in why he would bother with it.
So that's her thing. She cannot figure this out. First of all, look at the way he talks to her. I mean, we don't get the inflection in the voice, but he didn't say, "Please, kind lady, would you get me a drink?" Okay? I mean, he didn't say that, or at least in the New King James here, he didn't say it that way. Does anybody's version say it a little more mild than that?
Yeah, it says, would you give me a drink instead of give me?
Yeah, no, but that's the message. That's a paraphrase. So there, what do you have? And what do you have? What version? King James, yeah, so that's, anybody have an NIV? The paper ones are, what do you have, Ray? Yeah, yeah. And it doesn't sound, I'd have to look it up in the Greek to see how he actually said it. But it says, "Hey, give me a drink." And it said for his disciples had gone away. And then she says, "How is it that you," now, it says being a Jew, so there must have been something distinctive about him that she knew he was a Jew. Could be his clothing. Could be that he's got the curly things hanging down. I mean, we don't, huh? The nose. No, I mean, we don't, well, they would have the same. No, that's what I'm saying. Well, I mean, and they would look alike. I mean, Samaritans would have looked like the Middle Eastern Jews and that, but somehow there's something distinctive about him that she knows who he is.
Or just dialect.
What?
Dialect.
Could be. I mean, yeah, we don't know, but it's just that she knows who he is. Being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman. And that's got her also. You're asking me to do you a favor, and if you just read about the Jews at the time, they say that a Jewish man would not even speak to his wife in public. Yeah. Didn't say she won't talk to him. But yeah, I mean, it was that, it was that strict. So but anyway, so she knows that something's happening, that's happening there. Let's see. Anyway, Jews just didn't have the dealings with them. So, for reasons, this woman would have been despised by most of the religious leaders of the day. She was a woman, a Samaritan, a woman of questionable reputation. Yet in the interview with Nicodemus, John showed us that Jesus has something to say to the religious establishment. And it doesn't matter if it's the religious people who are, putting the pressure on those who aren't the right people, or he has something to say to the people that are being oppressed by the religious leaders. Jesus has something to say to everybody. Okay. So it says, in verse 10, in 10 through 12, I guess it is. Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God And who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him. You would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? See, this is where she can go toe to toe with him a little bit. She said, what are you talking about, this living water? How are you going to give me living water? You know what Jesus is saying, if you knew who you were talking to, you would be asking me for water, which is what's going to happen by the end of the story. But she's saying, if you knew who I was, you would be asking me for living water. And she comes back and says, how are you going to give us living water? You don't even have anything to draw out of the well with, you know?
Not understanding what he's talking about.
What's that?
He's talking about spiritual, she's talking about.
Right, no, and I wouldn't understand if he said that to me. I mean, I wouldn't understand. None of us would, especially if we don't have the Holy Spirit in us to enlighten us to this. That's why you can talk to people till you're blue in the face about Jesus and the gospel and the good news, and they look at you like, huh? And then you go, let me tell you again. And they don't have, because they don't have the Spirit of God in them. Were you gonna say something, Rick?
Yeah.
Do the microphone.
Give a better explanation of chapter 10, verse 28. And he said unto them, you know how that is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come to one of another nation. So that could be a better explanation.
Wait, well, say,
It should be a name we probably not understanding anything that it's saying, for one thing.
yeah. Oh, you mean not language wise?
Oh,
No,
that too.
nah, I think that Jesus can communicate with those people. But you're saying the same thing though, is that it was unlawful to go outside of your group, you know? And then I'm sure that there's still people that are,
Company zone.
yeah. Okay.
Well, it's also interesting, she's a, Samaritan, how does she know what he was lying?
Here's the thing. She knows that's my point. She knows, and it may just be that just because of the interaction that she has, I think this goes back to like when Ray was saying, why did he pick that woman? I think he picked that woman because he knows that she knows that they could have the conversation. You know, that she wasn't just going to say, you don't have a ladle to get any water out. You know, go back out in the desert and do what you do. But there's also that thing of when you're with Jesus, he has a way of making you understand. You know, I think when Jesus is talking to the people, they have the Holy Spirit because of those words. Yeah, think about it. Think about the thief on the cross. You know, I mean, 1 minute he's hanging there and he's cursing Jesus with his buddy, and then something happens. And he changes his mind. Now, see, we're generations away from that. So Jesus has set it up differently in how we receive the Holy Spirit, because we don't have that direct contact. So we receive it through his written word and his spoken word. Joke spoke today. We read along like that. For anybody who's sitting in the sanctuary who doesn't know Jesus, they're receiving that word of the Holy Spirit, right? You know, right then. And we do it through our baptism. We do it through the Lord's Supper. We do it with Jesus works it with interaction between us. And then one day that person, excuse me, who totally rejects, one day sits up and says, I think I understand. They probably don't, but but they've got that thing going. And the only difference is that they saw it in the light of the Holy Spirit. So this woman here, she knows nothing about nothing, but she's kind of feeling them out. Like that. I mean, she could have gone off running hysterical, saying, "Oh, a Jewish man's talking to me, a Jewish man's talking to me,"
Yeah.
and gone and got not her husband, but the man that she's living with. And he comes out with his shotgun and says, "What are you doing with my woman?" She could have done that, but she didn't. She's sitting there talking to Linda. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. That's the way I get my signals. She's right in front of me, but I gotta get it from. Hey, Chris, go on.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I think the reason or the way that the woman recognized Jesus as a Jew was perhaps maybe from his dialect.
Could be. I mean, we were talking about that a little earlier. You probably
Right.
missed.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then another thing, can we think that this woman is of Jewish ancestry, mixed ancestry?
Well, they are
because-
mixed. They are mixed some. It just as
Right.
far as how far
But-
back it goes.
The history, yes, the history.
Yeah.
But what makes me think that is in verse 20, I've read ahead here. Our ancestors, I have the NIV
Yeah.
version. So she says to Jesus, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. The Jews wouldn't want any Samaritans worshiping in Jerusalem.
Well, yeah, but I think what she's saying is you're saying that the proper place to worship is in Jerusalem, and they say we
If
don't.
they were Jewish or
Pardon?
had Jewish, if they were Jewish or had Jewish background, why would they care where the Samaritans worshipped?
No, I think that I understand what you're saying, but I think what she's saying is that she hears the Jews saying the only proper place to worship is in Jerusalem, without it being an invitation. Okay? In other words, saying you're doing it wrong and you're doing it in the wrong place. And because you're doing it in the wrong place, you're condemned. I mean, and we say that.
Same thing with Islam,
Do that what?
the same thing with Islam, they all face the temple.
Right,
Pray.
right.
They can't be there.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, again, we don't know, and you could be right. And maybe maybe someone in her lineage was a true Jew who married a Samaritan, and the family became Samaritan or remained Samaritan. And then she's the offspring 5 generations down. See, the thing is that with their worship, since you brought up the proper way to worship, or what she brings up saying that the Jews say is the proper way to worship, is that Samaritans, all religions do this. Again, this was something I was talking to Ray about earlier, is we mix things into the true religion. And after a while, that becomes part of the true religion, although it never was, And so Roman Catholics down in South America, I mean, they've got some of the weirdest religions that hang on to that Roman Catholicism. So they've got priests and nuns, and they wear crosses, but they've entered, voodoo and Santeria into the Catholic religion, and it gets practiced just like it always was. See, and I think that's what happened in Samaria. But you got to remember, see, here's the thing: when the Jews got taken away by the Assyrians, it wasn't like they were faithful Jews. That isn't why they got taken away. They were doing things wrong that they brought in that they thought would be just pleasing. Like when I said, one of Solomon's sons, Rehoboam or Jeroboam, I don't remember which one was which, with the northern kingdom, but they went and they built worship places up in the high places, which just that term itself was bad, amongst the Ashtarods, you know, which was even worser, because that's where they made the idols, and they did their religion there. And so now you go through a couple of generations, those people think that's what God's religion is, the way we do it. Can't understand why those guys down south don't do it the same way we do it, but we've got the true religion. And they're 100% wrong. Well, they're not 100% wrong because they've still got that, you know, that mixed in. So hang on just a second, Andy. So pastor goes to a conference, okay? And somebody's teaching something that's a little bit off, but you know, they get taught they go to conferences and they find these things where somebody says, we have a new way for you to build your church. You want your church to grow. You can't do it the old way that you've been doing it. You got to do the new way. And then they throw in something. Most of the times what they throw in doesn't hurt anything or help anything. But sometimes they could be grabbing onto something that is really, really off, but nobody knows. The pastor comes back, meets with the elders and says, hey, I think we ought to do this, man. Talk to these people, and they gave these presentations. They tripled the size of their church and everybody's happy, you know? And so then the elders say, okay, let's give it a try. And you do it. It just seems slight. But then you bring in something else. You bring in something else, and all of a sudden you're not doing it right. Now you're doing what's offensive to God. And I think that's where the Samaritans got to where they were. But like I say, since the Jews got taken by the Assyrians, they got taken by the Babylonians, it wasn't like they were the pillars of the community. You know, I mean, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah. So what she has left over, it could be what Chris is saying, that she's got enough Jew in her, or it could just be that she knows what the traditions are. And I know that I can go back 2,000 years to our ancestor, Jacob. Because you have to go back that far to Jacob. You gotta go back 2,000 years, you know, Jacob, because he built this well. And now their religion's based on, all of a sudden that well becomes a center point of their worship. Yeah. Oh, you were gonna say something, Andy.
Look at our country today.
I don't know.
All points, parts of the country, if we all grow up under the same flag, and yet, whenever we start thinking about things, what's the common denominator in our country? Music. And depending on where you're from, the music is quite different.
Yeah.
We have a variety of it, but it's the common denominator. And these countries were probably in the same way. Whatever brought them together also divided them.
Well, that could be. Well, you gotta remember, America's a little bit different. America's a big, massive land mass, aside from the numbers of people, where Israel's what, the size of New Jersey, you know, and probably has an eighth of the population in that. But the main thing is that the Samaritans are different. They're like off to themselves, and everybody goes around Samaria. But Jesus goes right in. That's the key point here. Let's see. So she says, are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? He said, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says it to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. And then he's going to get into the whole thing about, you know, what the living water, what the living water is. Who knows just off the top of your head, what's the living water? Yeah, it'd be the Holy Spirit. You know, the difference when they talk about living water and regular water just sits still. You know, it's like it's in a big bucket and sits still. Living water would be like water that runs through a stream. Well, because it stays clean and nothing can really cling to it. And so it's a different kind of, you know, it's a different kind of water. And he says, he's going to say, that if you drink of this water, you're going to drink from it again. But if you drink from the living water, it'll satisfy, it'll satisfy you. So that's what we get into we'll do 13 through 15, then we'll call it a day since we started early. Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. That's a pretty good promise. Now, how many here would understand that if he was talking to you? He'd be going, no, what you talking about? And he says,
That question.
If you beat it into it,
what's that?
if you beat it into it.
Well, hey, how many people have either ourselves or people that we know that have been Christians forever and who just can't quite grasp it? They're going to hang on. They're going to take it on faith, which you need to do. And they're going to come to church, but they don't quite get it. Somehow this is going to work because it was promised to work. Don't quite get it. What are you going to say, Larica?
Going on his word. They are distracted from what's going on in the word, and they don't concentrate on Jesus.
Because people are distracted.
Yes.
Right? No. Life gets busy. How many times do you find yourself and you go, wow, the week passed and my Bible's still sitting on my dashboard in my car from last Sunday. I didn't even stop to think to get it out of the car. I need to read it a little bit. Life gets busy, and then we get distracted. And we know who's the one stirring the pot and distracting us, right?
Yeah.
It's Satan, So if we do get busy and we do get distracted, we want to not say, well, I've been busy. You want to say what Larry said, Satan has distracted me. And I have let Satan distract me. Right. Devil made me do it. That's right. Talk a little louder. I can't.
Whoever drinks, given will never thirst. But my understanding would be that we always have a hunger or a thirst for truth and trying to, I guess, trying to find out more and more about.
I don't know it's the same though. Like that. I think the thirst that we keep going back for is that personal thirst. Because when we get thirsty, we drink because we are thirsty. My spirit's not thirsty. I want to drink. Now, it could be that when he gives the spiritual water, the living water, that's because it's living water and it's moving, that's what keeps you going. Yeah, but you got to remember, he's making a point to her. He's not making a point to all of us for every question that we can, ask, like that. So we can only deal with what's in front of us.
With the water that's coming from the well or material water, not spiritual water.
Right. Yeah, no, that's the whole point. It's not like this water, but a little bit different. It's not like tap water versus bottled water. Well, we can make that difference. It's not like that because they're both water. They both do the same thing. And, we move on. This is a different kind of, this would be smart water. Anybody buy that smart water? Yeah. I know Carrie was telling me. Wait, Larica. Wait, say it again. I can't hear you.
God's word.
Yeah, the living water is God's word. At that time, coming straight from Jesus's mouth. Today, coming to us on the pages of John chapter 4. Yeah, no, you're right. So anyway, the woman said, Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw. See, she missed the point. She's saying, wait, he's got this living water that's gonna make it so I don't thirst again. If I can get him to give me the living water, I won't get thirsty again, and I won't have to come down here to the well to draw, to draw the water. What's that? Lug all that water home. Well, I think we all probably look for, for,
Both items will cover thirst.
I'm sorry, what?
Both types of water, thirst.
Right, different kind of thirst.
Takes care of our personal thirst.
Right.
Yeah. The other water is the thirst we have in knowing more about what Christ is all about.
Yeah. Well, even to go before the Christ part, it's that thirst that gets people to look into the spiritual realm. Now, where you come out and looking for that spiritual realm, because you may come out in voodoo. I don't know, because people get into their religious, spiritual worlds because of that thirst of knowing there's more than what I've got. Like that. It's just a matter of who directs, who directs them. Pardon?
We in the same.
We're in the same boat. We're in the exact, we are no different than any Bible character. Like I said, we're the rabbis walking by, even though we don't see it. Now, we would say, no, those people that went to church today and didn't stay for Sunday school, they're the rabbis walking by. Us, those of us here, we are the Good Samaritan. And don't we go, like that? But we are, whatever the bad character is in the Bible, that's us. That's at least us before Christ, anyway. Like that, and probably we still fight that side. Sherry.
Just stating the obvious, but when a woman is talked about, and this story is so long, because the women's stories were usually very short, that makes it important to us to
Yeah.
pay attention to that. And there was no coincidence that Jesus chose that time and that place, because
Right.
she would be there.
Right.
And for those who watched the show, then mixed feelings about it, but this one episode with the Samaritan woman is a really good one to watch.
Yeah, no, it's a great story. You gotta remember, John 2, the wedding at Cana, 3, dealing with Nicodemus, and 4 now dealing with this woman at the well, are all dealing with outsiders. Jesus is at a wedding. There's nothing spiritual necessarily about the wedding. And someone comes to him or mama comes to him and says, oh, we got trouble, we're out of wine. So he solves the problem. He speaks to those people. Nicodemus comes at night. He's a Pharisee, but he says, the key verse that we miss is, we know that you are a man sent from God. It's not, I know you're a man sent from God, therefore I am here. He says, we know. And so now Jesus is addressing Nicodemus, just like he would address all other political, religious leaders. Excuse me. And then he ends up in Samaria with the woman as well. Now, we'll get into next time is that because he's going to, he's going to talk to her and he's going to confront her about, and yeah, you don't have a husband, but you've had 5 and now this. And he says, go and get your husband. And she brings the whole darn city down to hear the message. So we say, she doesn't understand, or she's got questions, or she's this or that. She brings the whole city down to hear Jesus. You talk about an evangelist like that. So somewhere in there, she got it. She may not understand it, but she's got it, that there's something special happening here. And I think a lot of times we don't realize how special the message is that we, that we get to hear, whether it comes from Deacon Joe or comes from Pastor Skip, we get to be here to hear that message. Sherry, and then we'll
Well,
close.
Thank God that he uses the broken to get his message across. He doesn't use,
No, he
you know,
never,
and thank God for that.
never uses the kings and queens and,
Exactly.
you know, they, just never, just never.
Should want us not to be as judgmental and prideful as we can get.
Or to think that the kings and queens could solve our problems. And that, well, no, because that's where we get politically. You know, all of a sudden we forget about who we are in Christ. And here we've got to back this political candidate or that political candidate, or we're going down the tubes and we forget. No, we serve the King of Kings, Lyrica. Then we'll finish up.
Jesus used the true believers to spread his word. If you're not a true believer, you don't go out and tell people about it. For instance, I'm taking care of a lady right now. That her husband is, he's down and he had serious surgery. And I don't know how to speak to her, but he was praying on it. This morning, he said, "There's no one on the church."
Yeah,
See, so you have to spread it, you have to, wherever you go and be around you, you have to spread it.
yeah. No, I know. For those who probably couldn't hear her, she was just talking about how what she labeled as true believers, I don't know if there's necessarily a difference, but is that those who hear the message and get it, go out and spread it. And those who don't spread it probably ain't getting it. You know, I mean, they're surrounded by it, but I don't know that. I don't know the answer. We'll talk more about that next week, because when we get into, now he's talking to the towns, you know, to the townspeople. Yeah. And I also think it's one last thing. I also think it's relevant that he went there and his disciples went into town, you know, probably to fill up the chuck wagon and, you know, stuff like that. But I think it was important to Jesus to be there one-on-one with the woman, not him and his posse almost like attacking the woman. You know, I think that's what, we're gonna say something?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Might be what the apostles have done had they stayed there with Jesus.
Yeah, they probably would have said, you can't talk to her. Yeah, no, like I said, see, those are things in stories like this that you do and you go, wow, I mean, is it coincidental that he ended up there alone with her, or did he purposely, you know? Yeah, you know, hey, you guys stay out of trouble.
That's why, and it only had Paul talk to the Gentiles.
Paul, what?
All the apostles were told to go to the Jews, they were never supposed to.
Right. No, always, yep. Yeah, no, like I said, and at the beginning, it said Jesus had told the 12 to go out, but he specifically said, don't go to any of the villages of Samaria, because he was sent first to the lost tribe of Israel. Ray,
Well,
okay, this is the last thing.
It's very interesting if you do some research on the Samaritans and what they believed in the Pentateuch, and not going beyond that as far as the Jewish people, the Jewish rabbi from John that needed to talk to, and also about the mountain that Moses had told the people to go and receive the blessings or receive their curses, and the Samaritans thought that Mount Ephraim was where the temple should have been
Yeah.
built, because that's where the blessings came from.
You know, I've
But
got,
they were wrong.
I've got a map. I've got a map that shows all the, you know, because in Samaria, that region there are 4 or 5 mountaintops, you know, that are up there. And obviously, everybody always wanted to make the God place the high place, you know, because well, God met people on the mountains, you know, like that. So then it's a matter of, and that'll be the whole, what technically what the second half of the story is we worship here, you worship there. Jesus is going to say, it's going to come a day we aren't going to worship on either mountain, you know? So, okay, that's all I've I've got there. I'm gonna turn off the recording and we're gonna close with Lord's Prayer.